Awesome.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming. My name is Boles. I've been visiting here at Knowmads for about 3 weeks. I'm originally from California, lived all over the United States. I don't really have a home right now. Knowmads is my home at the moment. Welcome home. And this is my presentation called The Art of Self-Directed Learning. And this came about because I asked myself a question a while ago, which is, have you ever taken a class, either in school or college or university, about learning how to learn? A class that teaches you how to be an independent learner so that once you're done with school, you can continue learning on your own. Has anyone taken this class? One? Okay, so a few, maybe 3 out of 30. That sounds about right. I never took this class. I went to normal California public schools, and I went straight into college. And I was studying astronomy and physics because I saw a movie that made me want to be an astrophysicist. It's also a very impressive thing to tell people, that you're an astrophysicist. They have no idea what it means. You don't necessarily have to have an idea what it means either. But then I realized I didn't love math enough to actually be a scientist, and so I was having a little quarter-life crisis in college when luckily a friend handed me a book by a New York City school teacher who had taught for 30 years, won a lot of awards for doing innovative stuff, taking kids out of the classroom and putting them into the community to do apprenticeships or research projects. And then he quit teaching. And he wrote an article to the local newspaper, and he said he didn't want to hurt kids anymore. So that blew my mind. And I was thinking about being a high school science teacher as my backup plan. And then I read this book, and I thought, So I went onto Amazon and found all the related books to that book, and I read them all, and pretty soon I realized I had to go into alternative education. That was the calling. And so I was lucky that I got to design my college degree around alternative education. I was thinking about dropping out for a little bit, but I was in a college that let me change everything around. And so that's what I ended up doing. So that was pretty cool. I did a little bit of learning how to learn in college because I got to design my own program, but I didn't really learn the big lessons until I got here, which is a summer camp for teenagers in the United States who don't go to school. The summer camp is called Not Back to School Camp. And it happens in August and September when everyone is normally going back to school after the summer break. And these kids are not going back to school. They go to the summer camp instead for 2 weeks and hang out with each other, spend long nights, go to some workshops. It's sort of like the Knowmads experience, except for teenagers on a very short time period. And this is when I actually got to meet my first batch of unschoolers, people who don't go to school and they focus instead on self-directed learning. And I said, wow, okay, these kids are pretty awesome. And I started working with them full time. This led me to start a company called Unschool Adventures. I've been taking teenagers all across the world and on programs in the United States. And it also gave me the opportunity to write a couple books, one about how to get into college or university if you don't go to high school, like these teenagers do. And another, more recently, about what you could do instead of going to college, instead of the default assumption that everyone should go to college or university. As I was doing this research and meeting people and taking people on trips, I was thinking, the unschoolers don't actually have all the answers. Because a lot of them, some of the ones who never went to school in the first place, still struggled with these common problems of self-motivation and discipline and getting stuff done, even when there's no external structure imposed on you. And so I ended up looking in a lot of other places to answer that question, how do you learn how to learn? And it took me to some pretty interesting places, and I've come back with some stories and some tools, and I'm writing a book about it, and that's what I'm going to share with you today, some of the stuff I found out.
Sounds good.
Thank you. We must start with the first question, of course, what is self-directed learning? That's sort of a mouthful. In the United States, there's the term homeschooling, which is popular, and homeschooling is legal all across the United States. But it's a terrible term because it makes me think of mom teaching math at home, like in front of the kitchen table. And that's not a good image. Mom doesn't know math and history and science and everything else. Then there's the term unschooling, which I mentioned. That's who I've been working with. Unschooling doesn't mean anything. That's like saying unlearning or uneducation. It just means we are not something. You can't define something by its negative. And so I like the term self-directed learning, but it's a mouthful also. So what does it mean? I actually found a story about somebody from the Netherlands that really inspired me to figure out what self-directed learning was. And some of you probably know this girl, Laura Decker, who caused a riot when at age 13 she said, I want to become the youngest female to circumnavigate the globe on my sailboat. And there was the Dutch Child Welfare Office, which got involved and said, like, no, you can't do this. Even though Laura had essentially grown up on a sailboat, she started sailing by herself at the age of 6, and her parents were completely supportive of this. They'd done so much preparation for this journey. Despite all of those factors, the verdict was still no, and as I understand it, a lot of people agreed with that verdict and said, this is actually kind of an irresponsible thing for you to be doing. So a self-directed learner, I think, is somebody who has a dream, and they will fight for it in the face of sort of arbitrary authority. And so Laura embodies to me somebody who's a self-directed learner, and her parents also. They fought the decision for about a year. At one point, she ran away to the Caribbean island of St. Martin to protest this kind of arbitrary ruling, and eventually they had the support of the international community of parents and educators and sailors, and a different judge overturned the first court order. And 2 weeks later, she departed from Gibraltar in her yacht called Guppy. And about a year and a half later, at age 16, she became the youngest female to ever sail around the world by herself. Laura is a self-directed learner. Of course, you do not need to be some magical person who sails around the world to be a self-directed learner. I think of self-directed learners as very normal people. They get up in the morning, they brush their teeth, they check their email, and then they ask an important question, which is, what is worth learning today? If they're young, they probably go to school. And when they go to school, they probably do well and do their homework, and they're into what they're studying because they're there to learn. If they're older, they probably go to work, and they probably do very well in work, and they're probably one of the most valuable people on the team, and they contribute because they're there to learn. But self-directed learners, as soon as the learning stops, they jump ship. So if you're in school and all of a sudden school is not helping you learn anymore, maybe it's becoming an obstacle to learning, self-directed learners figure out how to educate themselves without school. If you're going to work and all of a sudden work becomes a place that's no longer about learning, it's about something else, then they figure out how to make a living without a traditional job. Maybe they freelance, maybe they start their own program. That's what self-directed learners do. They focus always on learning. They also don't do some things. This beanie over here, by the way, you're seeing some of the first draft illustrations from this book that's coming together. And my friend Shona is illustrating each chapter. So they're still a little rough around the edges, but I think you'll get the point. This is an illustration of a beanie I once owned because it was given to me as a gift from a former student. And on one side of the beanie, it said, teach yourself to learn. And as you rotated it around, it said, learn to teach yourself. But the words overlapped, and so as you continue rotating it, it says, teach yourself to learn, to teach yourself to learn, to teach yourself to learn. And I always loved that beanie. Unfortunately, I lost it in a grocery store in Berkeley, California, and I still regret that to this day. But it embodies everything I like about self-directed learning, and it uses the word teach. Something I've noticed being in this alternative education community in the US is that there's actually some hostility towards teaching and teachers and structure and school. But I don't think that's, you're kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater at that point. Teaching is just as much a part of life as learning. And so to me, a self-directed learner is not somebody who vilifies, who makes an enemy out of teaching or structure. They know that they can get value from school or from a structured environment or from a teacher. They don't have to do everything on their own. Self-directed learner does not hang around unchallenging places filled with bored people. They know that that is the fastest way to become unskilled and bored themselves. They do not hide their passions or interests in order to please others, even if those people are very close to them, like their family. They know that their passions are the root of their power. They don't learn in total isolation. There's this idea that if you are a self-directed learner or a homeschooler, you do everything by yourself. But self-directed learning is not self-isolated learning. If you're self-directed, you know that you need other people most of the time to get stuff done. Finally, we don't worry if we don't learn something today that we can't learn it tomorrow. And I think that's a common assumption that we take through institutional learning. We say, oh, you have to go to college right after you finish school. Why do I have to go to college right after I finish school? Well, if you don't, then you can't enroll in it again. Yes, I can. I can enroll in college later. I can take a year off. I could take 2 years off. I could do some weird hippie program called Knowmads, and then I can go back to regular structured education if I want to. So there's no rush. So I'm going to take you through 4 major categories of sort of concerns or common problems around self-directed learning. The first one, the one that we always talk about is, yes, I know I could teach myself stuff if I needed to, but I don't have the self-motivation. I don't feel like I'm capable of continually pushing myself. And so I've got a few stories to share about this challenge. There's an author named John Cheever who would wake up every morning, put on his clothes, put on a full suit, in fact, eat breakfast, go to the elevator in his apartment building, take the elevator down with other people who are going to work to the ground floor. They would get off. He would close the door and continue going down to the basement where he had his little writing spot, and he would take off all of his clothes except for his underwear, and then write in his boxers all morning, and then come back up for lunch. And that's how he got stuff done. Has anyone read the book by Stephen Pressfield called The War of Art? Fantastic book for the self-motivation challenge for anyone interested in anything resembling art. And the phrase that Pressfield uses is, you need to turn professional. A professional is somebody who shows up every day, no matter what, and puts in the hours to get the work done that they need to. I think that that's a good, straightforward description of what you do need to be able to do as a self-directed learner. Sort of like John Cheever writing in the basement. He showed up every day, he put on his suit, and he did his writing. And if he didn't have any writing to do, he would sit in front of his typewriter and just stare at it. You know, no smartphone, no Facebook, just him and the work. So that's kind of easy advice to say, but I also think we need to be careful around the word discipline. Because discipline is a word that we've learned from school to mean forcing yourself to do really unpleasant things that you probably wouldn't want to do in the first place. That's, I think, the general definition. And that's not the kind of discipline I'm talking about. We need to be very careful when we talk about discipline to talk about stuff we want to do versus stuff we're being forced to do. So here's a few questions to consider when you are feeling the need to procrastinate, when you feel like you don't have that self-motivation. And you're wondering, am I avoiding the work I need to do, or am I just working on the wrong thing? Inspiration from these came from Paul Graham, who's a Silicon Valley VC. First of all, if you don't do this work, are you going to feel physically ill? Are you going to feel really bad about not doing this work? For example, for me, if I don't go for a run every few days, I'm going to feel sick. If I don't get some writing done once a week, I will physically feel like, God, there's something wrong with me. You know? It's like I'm coming down to something. Another question to ask is, when you do this work, do you feel like you're making a difference? If you don't, it's probably not the most important work. And finally, in the past, when you've done this kind of work, after you've gotten started, after you've gotten over the hump, when you've put on your running shoes, and it's raining outside, and you actually go out and you start running a little bit, does self-motivation suddenly take over? If you're an artist, if you get over that hump of being scared to start working on your art, does the self-motivation take over once you've gotten there? If your answer to all these questions is yes, then this is probably the work that you need to be doing. then that's when it's time for the classic Stephen Pressfield style discipline of turn off your Wi-Fi, disable your phone, get rid of all distractions and just focus. Go into the basement, get into your underwear, and just do your work. But if the questions to some of these are no, maybe you are doing the wrong work. I went to a wilderness summer camp for the first time when I was age 11. And it was a great experience. I didn't brush my teeth for 2 weeks. That was great. I made a camp girlfriend when I was 12. She was 14. I told her I was 13. She found out that I was actually 12. And then she broke up with me.
Oh.
So I learned that lying to make somebody like you doesn't work. And one of my favorite memories from this camp is when I was age 11, halfway through the camp, we did a campfire. And we stayed up until about 10:30 at night. And then at the end of this campfire, they put out the fire. It was pitch black out. We're in the middle of nowhere. And they said, all right, first-time campers, you're each going to walk back to the camp through the dark alone. All of a sudden, I had these thoughts of like an entitled, litigious 11-year-old, like, who are these people? They can't do this to me. I will sue every single one of them. But then one of the instructors came up and she put her hand on my shoulder and she said, don't worry, we've prepared you for this. And I remembered, this was kind of a weird camp, because the first thing you learn when you go into this camp is that there's one phrase you are not allowed to say for the entire 2-week period, and that is, I can't. Instead of saying I can't, we got this funny story about a Tanaki monster. Tanaki is I can't spelled backwards. And if you say I can't too many times, you get a Tanaki monster and you have to drag it along behind you, and it's a giant metaphor, which made a lot of sense for an 11-year-old. A little weird when you're a little bit older. But all the instructors took it seriously. If any of the instructors caught themselves, or the campers caught them saying, I can't, they would do some sort of self-imposed challenge, usually like push-ups or crunches. And so if an instructor said, I can't, usually by mistake, and I said, got you, then that person would just like drop to the floor and do like 50 crunches. It was fantastic. The camp director would give you $100 if you caught him saying, I can't. And he actually did that 7 times. Not like in one summer, but over the course of his career, he's done it 7 times. And so I was taking a kayaking class at this summer camp, and we were practicing flipping over the kayak. This is one of those kayaks where you put your whole body in, not just a flat top. And so we were practicing flipping over and escaping from the kayak. And this one time I tried to escape and my foot got caught in there. So I was sort of like a mutilated fish, like trying to gasp for air. And I just kept saying, I can't, I can't, I can't. And the instructor brought me up and he said, instead of saying I can't, try to say one of 2 things. He said, either say I choose not to, because it is your choice to be here. You can leave this kayaking class, you don't have to do another one, we're not forcing you. Or he said, say, I could if I. And so he walked me through this. He said, all right, you could if you, and I thought, I could if I was not in this kayaking class. He said, yes, okay, thank you. And he said, try another one. He said, I could if I, if I had smaller feet. I said, okay, how about another one? I said, I could if I took a deeper breath and like leaned forward more when I was popping out of the kayak. He said, let's try that one. I flip over, I pop out, all of a sudden I'm a kayaker. So this is what I get reminded of when I'm here at this camp and I'm 11 and I'm about to walk through these pitch black woods. The instructor puts her hand on my shoulder and says, you could if you, I thought, okay, could if I found that dead tree, which is right at the bottom of the granite shelf, and then there's this gully that I have to follow. It goes back down. It's sort of a natural stream. And then you get into that dirt path in the forest. And if you just stay on the dirt, then you're back at camp. And I literally then looked up and I was back at camp. And I had made it. We had all made it. Nobody died. This was not some sort of mean prank. And that's when I realized that in our minds we have cages and we have keys to escape those cages. And what this summer camp taught me is that I can't is this really common cage, and that a key to get out of it is I could if I. I went back to work at that camp as an instructor, and I learned more and more of these cages and keys. And it taught me to watch my language very closely because language becomes actions. And so to this day, these are phrases that I try to avoid or replace with the key as much as possible because even if I use it in casual language, casual conversation, I feel it does affect what I can do. All of this is for this idea of not just having one right answer to a problem. The problem of getting my foot out of a kayak, there wasn't one right answer. The instructor had me come up with 3 or 4 or 5 different right answers. And so this idea is you need to have multiple right answers to every problem. Somebody who symbolizes this to me is Sean Aiken, a Canadian guy who went through a totally normal, traditional education. He went to public school, he went straight into university to study business. He graduated, he had good grades, and then he had absolutely no idea what he wanted to do after he graduated. And everyone kept telling him, Sean, find your passion, man. Just go find your passion. And he was like, what does that mean? Can you be more specific? And nobody could be more specific. They're like, no, just find your passion. He's like, how? And nobody had an idea for him. So he traveled for a little bit, he moved back home, he was thinking about it. He realized he just didn't have enough experience in the world of work to make any sort of informed decision. He'd gone through 16 straight years of traditional education, and he hadn't actually done any work. And so how was he supposed to make a decision about his career? So he came up with this brilliant idea of doing one job a week, every week, for an entire year. He called it the 1 week job project. And so he started just with his network of friends and family, and he asked around, who can hook me up with a job, essentially an internship, for 1 week. So he got a few offers here and there. He set up a website and started blogging about what he was doing. And all of a sudden, this story started creeping out onto the internet. He began getting unsolicited offers for 1 week jobs. He worked as a dairy farmer, a bungee jumping instructor, an advertising executive, a baker, a firefighter, and about 46 other professions. And he ended up turning this experience into something he could speak and write about. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a very clean story like, oh, and I discovered a number 37, that's the one for me. No, it wasn't that simple. But he's starting this 1 week job project in all these different countries to help kids or teenagers or college students do something similar. Multiple right answers. Here's a program that I've been running for a number of years for teenagers in the United States. It's called the Writing Retreat. And the idea behind the Writing Retreat is, let me start with a question. How many of you have tried to write a book? All right, got a few hands here. How many of you have succeeded in writing a book? Yes, okay, so you 3 know, like I know, exactly what desperation looks like. And that is you sitting in front of your empty document with a blinking cursor. Writing a book is really hard. Really hard. And imagine trying to do it not now with all of your experience, but as a teenager, trying to write an entire book, let's say a novel. It seems almost impossible. But in 2009, I brought 15 teenagers to a beach house in Oregon and said, your mission is to each write your own novel in 1 month. And they each wrote a novel in 1 month. We were following this idea called Nanowrimo, National Novel Writing Month. This was started by a guy in San Francisco who had wanted to write his novel for a long time, but he kept putting it off, finding excuses, I have to work, until he was so frustrated with himself and all the bullshit he was giving himself for not writing this novel, that he finally said, I'm going to write this novel in the month of November. I'm going to write 50,000 words. That's what I count as a novel. It's going to be a first draft. It's going to be crap. I'm going to write absolute crap. But I'm going to have a first draft instead of nothing. And so if you divide 50,000 words by roughly 30 days, it's about 1,700 words a day. Not a terrible thing to give yourself. And he got a few friends together in San Francisco to meet up at coffee shops around his apartment and work on writing every single day, no matter how much other work he had, no matter what was going on in his life. And by the end of the month, he had 50,000 words. So we took that idea at the Writing Retreat, and we put a bunch of teenagers into a beach house. And we had a little bit of structure. We had some writing workshops. But that was pretty much it. We had like a daily check-in and a writing workshop. And the rule was you have to show up for dinner. But we didn't have any wake-up time. You could wake up at 2 p.m. in the afternoon here if you wanted to, and then write from 1 a.m. until 4 a.m., which actually turned out to work for a lot of these teenagers. And let's say you do wake up at 2 p.m., you stumble downstairs in this house and you smell like bagels and Nutella, and there's a bunch of other teenagers, some of them are playing music, but a lot of them are just writing. They're on their laptops writing. What does that make you want to do? Maybe write, but maybe not. Maybe you're distracted. So you go to the coffee shop in town and you meet a couple other teenagers from the writing retreat. And what are they doing? They're writing. What do you feel like you should be doing? Maybe I should start writing today. No, you go back and you could take a walk at the beach, and you come back into the house, and what's going on? A power hour, which is a little informal competition to see who can write the most words in 1 hour. Let's say there's about 10 people doing that. Okay, you start writing. The principle behind National Novel Writing Month or the writing retreat is that something that's very difficult to do on your own, like write a novel, something that's fundamentally an individual challenge, can be made a lot easier when you do it together. This doesn't mean you're collaborating on everything. This doesn't mean you're forced to compromise your ideas. You're just doing your own personal work in the presence of others. That's why co-working works. That's why artist colonies form. People who do serious individual work need to be around other people who do serious individual work. That's how you find self-motivation for something like writing a novel. The big answer, I think, though, is that self-directed learners get consent. I took a EMT, Emergency Medical Technician class, right after I finished college. So I really wanted to just get some real hands-on skills, something tangible. And so I was expecting to go into this class and be like, yeah, they're going to teach me how to stop massive arterial bleeding, or stick a pen into somebody's neck to help them breathe again. No, we talk about consent instead. But it was good because I learned that with any sort of helping profession, you can also hurt people if you don't get consent, if you don't get their permission. And this really resonated for me in the world of education. By the way, here's what I mean by consent. If you consent to something, you understand what you are committing to. You know that there are alternatives, and you have some idea of what they are. And you always have the power to say no, even if you've said yes. Think about a parent who wants to get her son to practice violin. There are a couple different ways to go about this. There is perhaps the standard way, which is just signing the kid up for violin lessons, and you will go to those, mister, whether you like it or not. Not exactly consensual. A different way, and a way that I've been learning from a lot of these unschooling families, is to have a long discussion with the kid and say, here, this is what I'd like you to give it, to try out. Just try 3 lessons, understand what you're committing to, with this violin teacher. My goal for this is for you to develop a sense of music. And so there are other ways we could do this. It doesn't have to be violin. You could try piano, you could try something else. We could go to the symphony together. So there are alternatives. And then finally, if the kid says, yes, I'm going to take your violin lessons, make sure that the kid still has power to say no, even after they've said yes. They can opt out. Otherwise, it's not really consensual. And so a self-directed learner, I think, finds their motivation by always giving consent. There's a great quote from an unschooling mom who I know through Facebook. She was responding to the question, do you make your children learn anything? I'm going to read her response because I love it so much. No, I do not make them learn anything. I inquire, I suggest, I offer incentives, but I do not make. I am not their central planner. That job is taken. My job isn't to decree what they will be good at, or what they will do, or how they will do it. I am not king in their lives. They are sovereign. Their minds belong to them. It's their property, after all. My job is to approach them with humility and know that my ability to discern what they are to be, or to do, or to excel in is nothing compared to theirs. My job is to assist them in their discernment, to make experiences, work, play, resources, teachers, mentors, collaborators available to them as they construct themselves. To talk things through with them, but not talk it all to death. My job is to sit down, shut up, and serve when I can. I direct nothing. Less of me, more of them. I like that statement. She's smart. A shorter way to put it would be the C.S. Lewis quote, "Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most impressive." This might be a good sort of summary statement for the state of traditional schooling. All right, that's self-motivation. Let's talk about learning online. A common phrase that I've heard working in the world of self-directed learning is, you can teach yourself anything online. Maybe, maybe not. Has anyone been to the website, "Let me Google that for you"? Oh, you're in for a treat. So my friends and I have this thing we do with each other. If one of us asks some simple fact-based question, like, "Wonder how far it is from here to the moon," another one of us will respond, "If only there was some sort of large, fast, free information network that we could consult to determine this answer." Of course, we're just talking about internet, and we have smartphones and laptops, and anyone can find out how far it is from the Earth to the moon very quickly. Yet we still ask these questions that we could be figuring out ourselves with Google. And so Let Me Google That For You is a great website to use if you have friends who ask these sort of questions that just drive you a little bit crazy, and you're like, why don't you just do the research yourself? So when you go to Let Me Google That For You, you type in the Google search that you really wish that person would have just done themselves. So how far from Earth to moon? It creates a link. Okay? Then you take this link and you give it to your friend. They say, like, how far is it from the Earth to the moon? So you send them the link. Okay? They open it up. It opens up a Google screen that types in for them the question that they could have done themselves. Hit search, and then says, "Was that so hard?" And then it takes them to the results. So Let Me Google That For You is a nice snarky reminder that the internet's one of the most powerful learning tools we've ever invented, and that you really need to take advantage of it. And if you don't, you are going to be falling behind. You are not going to be the self-directed learner that you could be. In the words of one of my new favorite authors, Austin Kleon, there are no stupid questions, just you couldn't effing Google that questions. I love that guy. So, litmus test for you. Can you use Google to prepare for a job interview? Maybe, can you find the Twitter accounts of some of the executives or the team members who you'll be working with? Can you research the work that they've been doing already so that when you go into that interview, you can be informed? Can you find someone's email address? This is one of my favorite things to do online. I feel like Sherlock Holmes. Trying to find the email address of a relatively famous person, somebody who has reason to hide their personal email, and then I find it anyways, and I email them. Be like, "Hey, what's up? My name's Blake." That's a lot of fun. Can you go on YouTube and figure out how to do practical things in life, like change an oil filter or install a window? That's very useful. Can you find any place of business and get driving directions there? How about, can you take one piece of news and then get 5 different perspectives on it by finding 5 different sources? Find the cheapest flight possible, very handy. And finally, can you use the search operators that Google and other search engines use, like putting stuff in quotes, using a minus sign so that you exclude something from your search, or using cite, : to only search certain types of sites like .edu or .nl. If you can, great. If you can't, just Google it. So the internet is powerful. The internet is important. There is a young man named Jonah Meyer. When he was 15, he got really interested in chemistry, and seriously interested. He just read one of these general science books, and all of a sudden he was like, "Chemistry's awesome." So he went online and he started researching it. He found some more books to read. He found some online lectures, but that wasn't quite doing it for him. He needed to get more. And so he lived by this university, the University of Massachusetts, and he went online and he found the professor's email address who teaches the introduction level chemistry course. Remember, Jonah's 15, college students are usually 18, and he sent an unsolicited email to the professor saying, "Hey, what's up? My name's Jonah, I'm 15, I'm really interested in chemistry, I'm not a student at the university, but I would love to sit in on your chemistry class because I think it's going to be awesome. And that's it. Please? How do you think the professor responded?
Yes.
Cool, yes. Well, I mean, part of me wants to say, professor would say, like, who are you? Get out of here. Like, wait until you're a student at the university, and then sign up like everyone else. Don't jump the queue. But the professor did say yes. Why? Why did the professor say yes?
Because the normal students are not interested in their classes.
Who wants to be in an intro chem class? Like, probably everyone's skipping class or sleeping through it. And then there's this kid who, shows up and is like, I love what you do, man. Can I bask in your presence? Of course you're gonna let this kid come. So he didn't get credit for the course, he just got to audit it for free. And at the end of the semester, no grades, he did take all the tests, he did all the homework, but he did get a letter of recommendation from this professor to the next professor saying like, hey, let this kid sign up for your Chem 2 class because he's awesome. And so this was all through the power of finding somebody's email address and sending a short, nicely worded introduction. Also, being a very curious person. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Joda, that's the first classroom that he had stepped foot in 3 years. He dropped out of middle school when he was 12. This is my friend Brian, the injured one. He's also a former college roommate. He loves to throw himself off of really tall places. And recently he was at a lake called Bass Lake in Northern California with this famous rope swing. And he unfortunately, on his first swing, held the rope a little bit too low. He got going really fast, and he clipped his ankle on a root right at the base of the swing. And he felt it just shatter. And so his friends helped him get out of the lake area. That's where this photo is taken. And he ended up in San Francisco at a hospital. And unfortunately, he did not have health insurance. He was looking at a massive bill for this surgery. But what he did while sitting on the hospital bed was he whipped out his iPhone and he started researching how much hospital bills or surgery costs for this type of ankle surgery usually cost in the different states in the United States. And he found out that California was one of the most expensive states to get this kind of surgery done. But his home state of New York was one of the least expensive. So then he opened up a new tab on his iPhone and he found a flight that left that night from San Francisco to New York. The doctor said you probably shouldn't travel, but you probably won't kill yourself either. And so his foot got put into a temporary cast. He got himself to the airport, he flew to New York, and then he got seen the next day. Net savings for Brian, $30,000.
Whoa.
Smartphones are powerful. If you can lie in a hospital bed and you can do research very quickly that leads you to save $30,000, that is power. And that is something that you need to be able to do as a self-directed learner. Brian did, when I shared this story with him, he said, please let people know that he was traveling against medical advice. He does not recommend that anyone actually do that necessarily. Important caveat. Finally, it's not just about what you can consume on the internet, but what you can produce, what you can put out there. This young woman is named Anne Martin, and she is from New Jersey. She grew up going to a very competitive public school, and she was a competitive dancer. And she thought that was her track in life. She went to the University of Arts in Philadelphia, and she was going to get this dancing program, a normal dancing degree. But the pressure was just too much. She didn't want to deal with it anymore. So she dropped out after her freshman year. Instead, she took just a fraction of the money that she and her family were going to be spending on this expensive art school, and she took it to New York City to just take dance classes. She took 4 dance classes a day in widely different styles, hip-hop, jazz, capoeira, all over the place. At age 20, she met a producer named Jason Krupnick, and they were doing this sort of thing for a commercial, and Jason really liked Anne's dancing style because it was all inclusive of these different dance styles. And he invited her to work together on producing just a film, something fun. They took this license-free music from an artist named Girl Talk, who remixes all these modern artists, and they decided to make a full-length music video to Girl Talk. And so this is what inspired Girl Walk. And Girl Walk now is a video that's available for free online. It started as just a very brief clip, and I'm going to show you a version of that clip. This is what they made together. This is on the Staten Island ferry from New York to Staten Island with people, just the public. None of those other people are actors.
Nobody even knows.
Put your two legs on my booty, kiss it, could ya? See yourself with a nigga working harder than 9 to 5. The 10 to 6, 2 jobs to survive. Or do you need a baller till you get shot into the wall? Flag, tell your friends, but I taught ya. If you couldn't see yourself with a nigga when this goes, it's gonna bring it to this is so. Can I get a fuck you to the bitches for all of my niggas who don't love hoes? They get no love. Can I get a to these niggas from all of my bitches who don't got love? The niggas without love. Can I get a fuck you to these bitches for all of my niggas who don't love hoes? They get no love. Can I get a to these niggas from all of my bitches who don't got love? The niggas without love. Can I get a twerk, twerk, bounce, bounce, clap, clap? Can I get a twerk, twerk, bounce, bounce, clap, clap?
And it goes on. So Anne and Jason just had a fun time making this video. And they put it online, and people loved it. And they ran a campaign, they got a bunch of money to produce the full-length thing. And now Anne, who is a college dropout, what do you think she uses as her resume? Girl Walk. That, all of a sudden, is power. That's what you show to people when you want to get hired to do some cool dance project. And so what Anne now has is a digital paper trail. She has stuff online that people can use to trace her and her work. Videos, obviously, are a good place to start. Images, either digital stuff or analog. That means if you like to doodle stuff, then you just take a picture of that and you put it online, and you have your paper trail. Audio. We're just going through all of the senses here, you know? Ears, nose, eyes. Writing, social media, just having a very kind of well-attended Twitter account can be a good paper trail. And finally, if you build things, functional things, that becomes part of your paper trail too. It's your portfolio. This is, again, something that self-directed learners really need to take advantage of if they're going to be doing the best they can. Okay, so that's online learning. But like I told you before, a lot of these people who I work with are using this line, oh, you can learn anything online. No. And I think MOOCs are a great way to show that actually a lot of people don't really want to learn stuff online. A MOOC is a massive open online course. Back in 2006, when they started coming out, everyone was like, oh my gosh, Harvard and Yale and MIT, all of these Ivy League colleges in the United States and abroad, they're putting their best lecturers online. They're opening up the doors to the Ivy League. This will change everything. Yeah, here's the idea. Oh, let's all take college classes on laptops. Here's the reality. No one wants to take a class on a laptop. Oh my gosh, that's so boring. This is how I feel. I'm so tired of the word MOOC. Has anyone read, in the past few weeks, a study concluded that of the 100% of people who start an online college courseware, a free one, only 5% actually complete it? A 95% dropout rate? Yeah. Learning online is not going to save us all. Why is this? Because humans still matter. If you want to learn what love is, you cannot Google that question and get a satisfactory response. You need to go throw yourself into a few relationships. Maybe go on a camping trip and talk about it under the starry moonlight. If you want to discuss novels, you're going to be very limited if you are just Googling the answers. You need to find other people who love books. You need to travel far to a conference and actually connect with people. If you're really into what's real science and what's fake science, again, it's going to be very difficult online if that's what you limit yourself to. If you say, I can learn everything online, and you neglect the world of meeting actual scientists and having those conversations, you're done. You're going to be a half-baked, self-directed learner. In 2010, 5 young adults, ages 18 to 20, joined a program I ran called the Fall Retreat. This was in Southern Oregon. And for 6 weeks, they lived together in an apartment that I rented for them. They worked on personal goals that I told them, all right, give me your goals and tell me how you're doing each week. So I sort of mentored them in that way, had another staff member also. During the weekends, we would do some pretty wild stuff. I sent them on a hobo weekend adventure. So they got to pack only what they could carry on their bodies, and they walked down the train tracks to a reservoir, and they slept out. It was very cold that night, and all they had was a tarp. So they got to learn what it was like to not have very much and deal with that situation. They did a travel weekend where I told them, you have exactly Saturday and Sunday to get as far away from Southern Oregon as possible, and you only get to use $40. And so they had to find ride shares on the popular website Craigslist, and one group went up to Portland, Oregon. That's respectable, that's about 300 miles away, and they got themselves back. The other group went to San Francisco. That's about a 500-mile trip, round trip, and they stayed with a couch surfing host when they were there. Cool. The last thing I did with them is I drove them in the middle of the night to the local train station without any warning. I told them what they needed to pack, but I drove them to the train station, gave them some money, gave them a one-way train ticket to Portland, Oregon, and then said, here's your list of to-do things in Portland. You have 4 days. The first thing you should do is figure out where you're staying for 4 days, because it is getting awfully cold out there. And see you on Friday. And they only did about half the stuff on the list, but they came back in one piece, and they really enjoyed their experience. But as I thought about this program later, I thought, why did they pay me to do that? Like, they paid me money to create this experience. They were all 18 or older. They could have rented their own apartment. They could have kind of worked on their own goals. They could have met people. They could have gone and slept, outside under a thin tarp if they wanted to. They could have gotten themselves one-way train tickets to Portland, Oregon. Why did they need me to do that for them? The answer is that humans are still important. Humans do stuff that computers cannot do. We teach work habits. We teach people how to stick with goals when stuff gets hard, how to focus. Only we can be coaches, entertainers, teachers, role models. This idea that everything can be done through computers is total lie, total fallacy. And if you focus too much on computers as your, the main part of your education, you're in trouble. Favorite line that I have picked up over the years is, we are the music makers, we are the dreamers of dreams. There's no app for that yet. That was said by Arthur O something, or Willy Wonka. That's where I got the line. Who's heard of deliberate practice? Blow your minds right now. Okay, so this researcher in psychology, Anders Ericsson, he went to the Music Academy of West Berlin in the early 90s, and this is an academy famous for producing really good violinists. And he said to the professors there, to the teachers, he said, I want you to divide your students into 3 groups. The very good violinists, the ones who are going to become international soloists. The good violinists, the ones who will probably join some famous orchestra. And then the just okay violinists, the ones who will probably become violin teachers. Unfortunately, that's how it works. And so they did that, and Ericsson's team started interviewing these violinists from the 3 groups. And at first, it was hard to figure out why they were in those groups, because all of these kids had been studying violin for about 10 years. And at the academy, they all put in roughly 50 hours a week of work. So they looked very similar. How do you know who's great and who's just okay? They did much more thorough interviews and discovered that there were some significant differences between these categories. when they went back and actually calculated how many hours these kids have been practicing in their early lives, they realized that it wasn't just, oh yes, I've been doing violin for 10 years that mattered. It was how many total hours had they put in. The top violinists had around 7,000 hours of violin practice. Mid-level, about 5,000, and the just okay ones, about 3,000. So it did matter how much time you put in, but the most interesting result is that they discovered the top violinists were doing a sort of fundamentally different kind of practice than the other ones. And it was sort of like apples and oranges. This is why they coined the term deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is very different from regular practice, and they discovered this is how you build skills super quickly. Imagine just myself with a guitar. Imagine I want to learn guitar. What would happen if you locked me in this room with a guitar for 10,000 hours? Would I walk out as Jimi Hendrix? No, I'm practicing for 10,000 hours though. Why not? Why am I not going to become Jimi Hendrix?
Because you're not intrinsically motivated? Maybe?
No, let's say that I am highly motivated.
Drugs.
Drugs. Always a possibility. Is that too many or not enough?
Not enough.
Not
Not
enough.
enough. In Jimi Hendrix's case.
You need a teacher.
Need inspiration from others to try different stuff.
I think teacher is closest to it. I need feedback. I need somebody to help me figure out where I'm going.
Guidance.
Yeah, and that's the difference between regular practice, which is me and the guitar in this room, and deliberate practice, which is the practice that will actually push me towards becoming Jimi Hendrix.
Well, when you say teachers, it's funny that you mentioned Jimi Hendrix. He taught himself to hold the guitar upside down because no one really told him that he's doing it wrong.
That's right. Or did he play left-handed guitar?
Yeah,
Yeah.
He played
That's right.
No, he didn't play a left-handed guitar. He played a guitar left-handed. That's what I understand.
Although it was
Turn it
right.
A
around.
right-handed guitar, left-handed.
Right-handed
Yes.
guitar, left-handed.
So, here's what deliberate practice looks like as compared to regular practice. Deliberate practice is focused on a very specific goal. So it's not just me in a room saying, I want to become a better guitarist. It's me in a room saying, like, I want to play this scale perfectly. That's specific. Deliberate practice is designed specifically for your challenge level. This is where the teacher or the mentor comes in. They assess like where I am on my guitar level, and then they say, okay, the next step that you need to take is right here. And that step is not too hard, and it's not too easy. It's repeatable, so I can just keep working on that same step over and over again. And not necessarily with the teacher around. Maybe I could be given like, okay, here's what to work on for the next week. Here's the little steps that you need. Most important one, constant feedback. That teacher or someone that acts like that teacher is sitting there in the room when I'm playing that scale, and they're saying, all right, stop right there, try this instead, all right, go for it. In deliberate practice, the most interesting thing they discovered is horribly demanding and taxing. These violin students couldn't do more than 4 or 5 hours of this practice per day before they were totally exhausted. So this, oh, and it wasn't very much fun either. It kind of sucked. It was painful and difficult, and they wanted to quit a lot of the time. And so this is what the really good violinists did. This is how they described their work as compared to the just okay violinists. How do you find somebody who can help you with deliberate practice? Because that is the key here. And this is why you can't just become a world expert in something working totally on your own. The key is, I'm stealing this from an author named Daniel Coyle, is to avoid people who remind you of a courteous waiter who's always looking out for you. In fact, you want to find someone who scares you a little bit. You're like, oh, God. Somebody who watches you really closely, who doesn't talk a lot. Instead, they say, try this, try this. And they give you honest feedback instead of nice feedback. They should give you clear directions. They should love teaching the basics, not the fancy stuff. And all things being equal, pick the person who's older.
Discrimination.
Age discrimination is the key, yes. That's deliberate practice. I highly recommend you Google deliberate practice. It's one of the most fascinating things I've learned in the past few years. All right, we're getting near the end. Last thing, how do you go from self-directed learning into the real world? Yes, it's all fun and games when we're self-directed, but what happens when you need a job? My friend Carsey Blanton never went to school. She grew up in rural Virginia, chasing lizards, and... Sorry, do you have a question?
Yes.
Yes.
To the liver practice area.
Yes, go back.
Because actually we heard about something like this last week. One of the students, he is a bass player, and I think he was in the conservatory for 8 years, and he had all these, people pushed him, and he wanted to quit, and also there was the saying that the bad ones, they will be teachers. That's sort of the thing in the sports or in wherever in music. You're bad because then you're a teacher. But a lot of people actually enjoy teaching, and I wonder, because you bring it across so positive, but the effects that it has, this teaching method on people is very long term, and it's very negative actually on many people. They have constant doubts for the rest of their lives because they never think they're good enough. So I wonder, how is this? It doesn't fit for me to the self-directed learning, which is actually a positive thing, right?
So two things. First of all, the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is an example of stuff that you cannot learn online.
Yeah.
To develop these kind of skills, you usually need somebody else there to help give you the feedback and design the appropriate challenges. But I think to make this work with self-directed learning, you just need to combine it with the consent that we were talking about earlier. If somebody is forcing you to go to this violin academy, then yeah, you might get seriously damaged as a person.
Yeah.
But if you are choosing to sign up for this, or you don't even need an academy involved, if you decide to bring on your own teacher or coach for something you want to learn, then I think as humans we are willing to put up with this kind of demanding hard work and tough feedback much more than we would if we're forced into it.
Yeah.
So I agree that you can't have negative outcomes from this if you don't go about it carefully.
Yeah.
Carsey Blanton grew up in rural Virginia. She chased lizards, read books, and fiddled around with musical instruments. So at age 5, her parents said, she's so happy, why make her go to school? So she just never went to school. At age 13, she got really into music and guitar, and pretty soon she said, Mom, Dad, I want to go to this artist commune in Oregon that I know some people there. And she's 16 at this point. And her parents said, okay. And so she moved across the country at age 16, lived with these other artists and musicians in Oregon, and she met a funk band there, and the funk band said, Carsey, come tour the US with us. She was like, sweet. So she started touring, and she started doing some of her own music. Didn't pay very much, if anything at all, so she was working at coffee shops every now and then to help fund her low-income traveling bohemian lifestyle. And as her music progressed, she got a few big breaks. She got to open for Paul Simon for a little while in another group called the Woods Brothers. And fast forward to age 28, Carsey decided to produce her biggest album yet, which was a jazz album. She wanted to recruit some serious jazz musicians and produce something high quality. And so she went on to Kickstarter and asked for $29,000 from her community. She got $60,000. And this surprised me, and I think it surprised some other people, because Carsey didn't go to school, she didn't go to college, she doesn't have any sort of formal business training, yet this unschooled, untrained young woman raised $60,000 for a jazz album. How did she do that? Where did she learn the skills necessary to pull off this feat? This is truly impressive. Has anyone tried to run a crowdfunding campaign here? All right, keep your hands up. If your crowdfunding campaign hit your target and you were successful, keep your hand up now. It's kind of like writing a novel. Congratulations, sir. Congratulations. It's a really difficult thing to do, and she pulled it off. My opinion on the matter is that Carsey learned a few things that were very relevant to real life while doing this highly self-directed learning. And she learned that, first of all, it's not about her, it's about fulfilling other people's dreams. Secondly, and more importantly, as I think you Knowmads know, she learned how to tell a good story. Luckily, that's essentially what Kickstarter is asking you to do when you do a Kickstarter campaign. Here, if you go through their suggested stuff, that this is what we think you should put into your campaign, they're essentially asking these questions. Who are you? What are you building? What are you offering us? Who cares? Like, really, does this really matter? How might you fail? Do other people trust you? And how can I trust you? These are the questions you are answering when you run a Kickstarter or another crowdfunding campaign. Karsi didn't have any sort of formal training, but she learned through her self-directed path how to answer these questions. And that is what fueled her Jazz is for Everybody Kickstarter campaign. And so she got herself a Kickstarter MBA, the cheap way. Another friend I want to tell you about is Dev Carey, the man on the left. He's 50 now. He lives in western Colorado in an off-the-grid, naturally built straw bale house that he and his friend Jack, pictured next to him, built for roughly $30,000. They built each other's houses next door to each other. He has utilities cost of, I think, $30 a month for internet. And other than that, there's like minimal property taxes. He pretty much has no costs. He has no mortgage. And he has an 11-year-old daughter, Soraya, who he homeschools. And he spends about $15,000 a year. That's his budget, plus health insurance. And Dev has a lot of time. He is a very time-wealthy person. And he's used it over his years. He has a PhD in ecology, by the way. It's not, he hasn't been doing nothing. To go on all sorts of adventures around the southwest part of the United States, which is gorgeous. He constantly has people coming over and visiting and staying at his house. He helps his friends grow their food and harvest their food. And he just lives a very wealthy existence, but with very little money. And Dev has taught me that self-directed learning often requires a wealth of time more than a wealth of money. And he managed to pull it off for only $15,000 a year. How much is your yearly burn rate right now? Half of it. Well done. Well done. Dollars, not euros. Dollars.
Still.
So that's what I think of as one principle for taking self-directed learning into the real world, keeping your costs low.
What's the guy's name?
Dev Carey, D-E-V, C-A-R-E-Y. Finally, who has heard of fake Grimlock? Oh, I'm giving you guys so many pieces of gold here. Okay, if you do the Twitter thing, follow this guy. This is an anonymous, fake Twitter account. It's a giant bacon-eating robot dinosaur that advises startups. Yeah, put that in your pipe and smoke it, okay? And his most famous article that he's published online is called Minimum Viable Personality. There's this concept, there's this term in the startup world, the tech startup world, of minimum viable product, which just means what's the smallest thing you can get out the door most quickly so you actually have a product that people are using and they give you feedback on. Fake Grimlock said, yes, the most important step in having a product is to build your product. But the second most important step is to have a personality behind the product. No have personality, product boring, no one want. He always types in all caps and uses weird grammar. He's a really fun person to follow on Twitter. Highly recommend it. And so the lesson I've been taking away from this is, yes, it's very important to have skills as a self-directed learner. Karsi had guitar skills. Jonah, the kid who went to the chemistry class, was building science skills. But if that's your product, you still need to have a personality behind it. Mr. Grimlock's advice is, again, this is from a business perspective, answer these 3 questions if you want to have a personality. How do you change someone's life? What do you stand for? And who or what do you hate? If you have those 3 things, you have a personality. When I was in college and I got introduced to that New York City public school teacher who just totally opened my mind up to the world of alternative education, that's the first time at roughly age 20 that I started having a personality, at least by this robot dinosaur's definition. How would I change people's lives? I decided it's by showing them new educational paths, showing people their options, so they can make an informed decision. What did I stand for? Self-directed learning. And I hated the idea that so many young people's lives were being wasted in this kind of compulsory education system. And there's so many other awesome things they could be doing.
Just to get this clear, MVP is most valuable player, right?
It also means most valuable player in baseball, yes.
Okay.
But in this case, it's minimum viable personality.
Was wondering.
So that's when I got my minimum viable personality. And the other people I've shared, that's been sort of their power also, is the story that they've been telling, the fact that they do have a personality. Carsey, that was a big part of her Kickstarter campaign. Sean Aiken, the one who did 52 jobs in 52 weeks, his story was, I'm doing this unique alternative thing to learn what I'm passionate about. That's why people were offering him these one-week jobs. He didn't know all these people. These were offers from strangers. And Jonah, the chemistry student, his story was, I'm 15 and I'm in love with chemistry. He had a personality. One of my favorite authors, Seth Godin, says, if you fill an organization with honest, motivated, connected, eager, learning, experimenting, ethical, and driven people, you will always defeat the organization that only has talent. So skill is not the most important thing. All these other things are. That's how you go from being a self-directed learner to having real-world success. It's really easy nowadays just to focus on building skills. Go to college, university, master's. Everyone in Amsterdam has a master's degree, apparently. Walk away with these hard skills, and then the idea is you get hired. You have security in life. No, it's BS. You need something more than that. You need a personality. You need a story. Start focusing on that early. That's what self-directed learners do. So you've seen some of the book that I'm writing called The Art of Self-Directed Learning. Each of these little chapters is going to be illustrated with an original line drawing illustration. We're still working on those, but eventually it will come out. And if you want to know when the book comes out or anything else, please drop me a line somehow or another. You can find me at